Many places in the West are becoming less safe, and people are looking for a safe place to move overseas. Today I'm bringing you the receipts on the safest countries in the world. One of the common refrains why people won't move overseas is, yeah, I'm not going to move to Venezuela, that's not very safe. And indeed, Venezuela, while crime is coming down in parts of the country, it is, in some of the most recent stats, one of the more dangerous countries in the world. But the statistics go both ways. Those countries that are ranked very unsafe, and on the other side, the countries that are very safe. Chances are there are dozens of countries that are safer than where you live now, especially when it comes to violent crime. If you live in the US, you are not in the best position. But we're going to go through the ratings for 2024. Sometimes it's the smallest countries that are hard to measure because they just don't really have any crime to measure. So San Marino, for example, by one report on homicide rates, it's the safest country in the world. It's an enclave within Italy. They had 0 homicides, but so did tax-friendly Monaco. So did tax-friendly Andorra. So did tax-friendly Isle of Man. Those places all recorded 0 homicides in a year. They don't have a lot of other crime as well, and yet we don't have all the full data on those places because they're very small countries, or in some cases, territories. But those are places you can go to, and why do small countries often work better? We've talked about this for years. They're more friendly, more easy to immigrate to, lower taxes, and in this case, they have lower crime in many cases. But if you keep going down the list of homicide countries, Singapore, one of the lowest homicide rates in the world. We have the full data there, 0.16 homicides per 100,000 people. That's about as low as it gets in a country of substance, followed by Japan. Oman, I was recently in, some of the kindest people you will ever meet. Family values are very important there. Luxembourg, and then Qatar. Those are the 10 lowest homicide rates in the world. Look at the US homicide rate. It is actually in the bottom 50% by some metrics. And so all of those places are safer. Many of them are tax-friendly, and many of them will let you move there. But let's go through crime in general. This is from the World Population Review. They put together the Global Organized Crime Index. They look at various criminal markets, from financial crimes to cyber crimes to human trafficking, violent crime, arms trafficking, mafia-style groups, resilience of the police force, a whole bunch of factors, kind of like our Nomad Passport Index studies all the different factors of citizenship. They do that for crime. And so you have a lot of countries where they don't have the full data, like countries in Africa, like some of the smaller Caribbean citizenship by investment countries. The data there's often very old. Vanuatu, for example. Pretty low crime from the data that we have in some of those countries. So Vanuatu is a pretty safe place. Some of the Caribbean islands are very safe. Even, some of the Eastern European countries are very safe. But we don't have the full data. Where do we have the full data? Qatar, safest country in the world, was just there. They run a pretty tight ship. Number 2, not far behind, the United Arab Emirates. You see people are moving for lower taxes to places like Dubai, like Abu Dhabi, to a much lesser extent to Doha. That's a lot more employee migration. But one of the things people see when they get there is basically no crime. Violent crime, sexual crime, property crime. People know they can't get away with that there. And that's a different scenario these days than what's happening in much of the West. So if you're looking for lower crime, the Gulf, the Middle East, is one of those regions. Taiwan is number 3. They've always scored very well. Oman is number 4, tax-friendly Oman. Very nice place. One of the places in the Gulf people don't pay that much attention to. I find the people incredibly kind. And it's interesting because it's a lot more Omanis as a percentage basis than some of the other Middle Eastern countries. Armenia, a place we've talked about, not as developed. By this metric, the 5th safest country in the world, basically tied with Hong Kong. Say what you will about Hong Kong. Spent a lot of time there. It is a well-run place in terms of they're not letting people get away with committing crimes. Japan comes in next. Closely behind that is Singapore, tax-friendly Singapore, followed by Bahrain, also in the Middle East. And then the one European entry here, Slovenia, Saudi Arabia, Estonia, then you go to Monaco and Switzerland and Iceland. So you see Switzerland and Iceland talked about in these very Western-centric indexes, best places to live, most global peace, that kind of thing. And so Iceland may bring something different to the picture. That's kind of a free speech country. That's interesting. Switzerland, tax-friendly country. Those may be places to more easily get citizenship than a country in the Middle East. But when you actually look at the numbers, it's the Middle East and it is Asia. Now, is this the only thing you want to judge where you might move? No, because what have I always said? I have a home in Bogota, Colombia. Colombia is in the bottom percentiles of safe countries. A lot of the Latin American countries are. There is statistically more crime in a lot of those countries. But I spend time there. I live in the right neighborhood. I carry myself accordingly. I haven't really had any problems. I had one problem in the capital city of Nicaragua, and that's some of the highest levels of crime is in those Central American capital cities, with the exception of Panama City. So there are some places that are just really bad. I wouldn't necessarily go to Johannesburg, South Africa, or Managua, or Tegucigalpa, but you can live in places and have your own enclave. The same way I've got friends who live in Chicago, where things have just gone terribly in recent years, but they live in the nice neighborhood, so you can do that. But if you just want all across the board, very little crime, those are some of the places to go to. And what's interesting, Qatar, the UAE, Oman, for some people, Armenia, Hong Kong, Singapore, Bahrain, Saudi Arabia, and to some extent Estonia and Monaco and Switzerland, all tax-friendly countries. So what are you doing in the Western world, in your legacy brand country like the US? If we scroll all the way up to where is the United States, the overall crime rate is at 47.7. You compare that to Qatar, it's 14.3. So there's a lot of countries in between the top spot and the United States. You're still worse than Lebanon, Kazakhstan, Iraq, Indonesia, Albania, Cambodia, all safer than the US, all safer than Australia and other countries. I mean, Germany's down here. Germany's safer than the aforementioned countries. Latvia, Montenegro is one we talk about. Those are safer. Hungary's safer. What are we seeing? If you live in a high-tax Western country, you are paying a lot of taxes to have a place where you are increasingly uncomfortable. If you're successful, you're increasingly attacked. And they're not even protecting you from crimes. Now, this is different types of crimes, but there's more violent crime, there's more homicides, there's more property crime. And what are you seeing in some of the big Western cities? They're not even prosecuting the crime. You get arrested, you get in front of a judge, they let you out with no bail, and people continue to commit crimes. It's not happening in Qatar, the UAE, even in Montenegro, it's not happening. Now, what's interesting, besides the fact that these places are tax-friendlier than where you live, you could pay zero, you could potentially pay single digits, maybe double digits, low double digits in some of the European countries. Maybe you pay 10, 15% on the whole in the European countries. You're paying less to be treated better. But what's also interesting is you're seeing more of these emerging countries. You're seeing places in Eastern Europe. They, and perhaps, we've talked about Georgia over the years. It's a place where they've gotten rid of the criminals. They came through and did a purge. The people went somewhere else. And so now you have a safer place to live. And the tide has basically turned to where the places that you used to think were the safest are no longer the safest. I mean, just go through this list. You're paying less to live there. Forget just on a cost of living basis as well, but certainly on a tax basis. And you're getting much more safe conditions. And so, what can you do? You can outright move to these places. You can get a residence permit in the UAE. You can get a residence permit by investing in Oman or in Hong Kong. If you invest a lot in Singapore, you can get one. Saudi Arabia, you can purchase a permanent residence permit. Monaco, you can rent or buy a property and put some money in the bank and move there. Chile is one of the safest Latin American countries. You can get residence in Latin American countries pretty easy. Uruguay is one of the other safe Latin American countries. You can get residence easy. Poland has a low tax program. Portugal has a golden visa. You can simply move to these countries. Now, you might say, well, I don't want to do my banking in Armenia or Saudi Arabia. You don't have to. Here at Nomad Capitalist, we encourage you to distribute the parts of your life. So you might not move your company to Saudi Arabia, but you might move, parts of your life there. Right? And everyone has their own different opinions. That's what we help people with. We help people with dozens of different options. We have interviewed folks like Zuby, who spoke at Nomad Capitalist Live last year, who said, I grew up in Saudi Arabia. It was certainly more conservative then than it was now. And he said, I felt totally comfortable. It was not what the Western media and Westerners painted out to be. Now, you may like it, you may not, but it's an option. And when you come to Nomad Capitalist, we show you dozens of different options. We help you nail it down. Doesn't mean just because you live there that you have to move your banking, your company, your employees, whatever. You want to distribute these things. But that's option one. You can choose to move to the safe country. You can also accumulate residence permits in some of these different countries. And so if things become untenable where you live, you simply move in. So places like, again, Saudi Arabia, Hong Kong, Armenia, the UAE, and others on this list will allow you to get a residence permit, and you don't really have to live there to keep that residence permit active. You can keep it in your back pocket, and so that way you already know where you're going to go as your plan B when things become less safe where you live. Now you might say, listen, I'll just live in my country and I'll move somewhere safer. I'll just keep moving further and further out. I'll move to a further out suburb, whatever the case may be. But if you're going to uproot your life, if you're going to uproot your children's schools, if you're going to change all the things that people say, oh, I can't go overseas, what about the kids in their schools? If you're going to move, you might as well move. You might as well get a big tax savings in the process. You might as well go to a country that more aligns with your values. I don't think that most Western countries, certainly not the English-speaking legacy brand countries, I don't think that they really want to crack down on crime in many parts of the country anymore. Hey, the criminals are A-okay here. Very different culture in some of these safer countries. Imagine that. You actually get the results that you seek to get. You want to have something in your back pocket at the very least. Now, most of these countries are harder to get citizenship in. Taiwan is possible. That's kind of an odd one. But most of these countries, Switzerland you could, it's more the more difficult European ones. Estonia you could if you learn Estonian, and that's kind of a tough one. These are harder to get citizenship in. So it's not like you just go and get citizenship and you can live there. But here's one thing you can get. If you have family from Europe somewhere, get any European passport and then you can live in some of the safest countries. So you could get your Irish citizenship through your descent. If you have Irish ancestors, or your Slovak citizenship through descent. That's actually one of the safer countries on here too. And then you could live in Estonia. You could live in Slovenia, the safer European countries. So if you have ancestors, we help people get passports by ancestry. If you want to go to Malta, you can donate close to $1 million for your family. They'll give you a passport in about 18 months. And you can live anywhere in the European Union. So sometimes the kind of supranational block passports can help. Otherwise, go and get some residence permits in safe countries. And again, safe plus tax-friendly makes it worth getting. Nomad Capitalist can help you do that. Go to nomadcapitalist.com/apply. We had a current client who commented on a recent video saying, 99% of us are behind you, loving the service, thank you for all your help. And so that's the kind of experience you can have when you work with Nomad Capitalist, is we're going to take all your needs into consideration. I think economics, I think making sure your money is safe, your assets are protected, your taxes are reasonable. Maybe not zero, but reasonable. I think that's important, but so is your family's safety and making sure that safety continues. So having a basket of residence permits, maybe of citizenships, is a good way to make sure you can always have a place to go to be safe. Don't say, oh, when the first starts flying, I'll figure it out then. Because you're going to be behind the 8 ball and you're going to rush and you're going to make a rush decision rather than saying, I've got different options and I've got levers I can pull on. When this becomes less safe, I can do one of these 3 things I'm already comfortable with. That's, to me, how you protect your safety. These are the countries where you can do it. But also, you might want to say, I'll have residence permits where it's not as statistically as safe, but I feel comfortable in certain places, like in Latin America, where I have food safety, for example. I can grow my own food on land that I own. I can't do that in some of those countries. So all these different things have to be considered.